الله عز وجل في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم كل نفس ذائقة الموت وإنما توفون أجوركم يوم القيامة فمن زحزح عن النار وأدخل الجنة فقد فاز وما الحياة الدنيا إلا متاع الغرور. All praise due to Allah, we seek His aid, we seek His forgiveness, and we seek refuge in Allah from the evil of our own souls. And I bear witness that there is no God except Allah, and that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is His slave and His messenger. Whomever Allah guides cannot be misguided, and whomever He is allowed to go astray can never be guided aright. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in approximate meaning in the Quran, every soul shall taste of death, and only on the day of judgment shall you be paid in full recompense. Only he who is saved from the fire and admitted to the garden will have attained the object of life. For the life of this world is but goods and deception. And another ayah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, زُيِّنَ لِلنَّاسِ حُبُّ الشَّهَوَاتِ مِنَ النِّسَاءِ وَالْبَنِينَ وَالْقَنَاطِيرِ وَالْمُقَنطَرَةِ مِنَ الذَّهَبِ وَالْفِضَّةِ. Fair in the eyes of men is the love of the things they covet, women and sons, heaped up amounts of gold and silver. And the ayah continues on to talk of horses and cattle and land, saying, such are the possessions of this life, but the nearness to Allah is the best of goals. My dear brothers and sisters, we come today to remind ourselves of paradise and of hellfire. And it's important for us to keep things in perspective in our lives, because the reality is that we are here on this earth. We were created for one reason, and it was the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why we are created. The eternal question that philosophers struggle with, why are we here? What is the meaning of life? Alhamdulillah, was given to us succinctly more than 1400 years ago. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I did not create jinn and mankind except to worship me. So the answer is simple. Why are we here? To worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we do that which is other than worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're not fulfilling our purpose. So we should have three goals around that. One, to avoid the wrath of Allah and the hellfire. Secondly, to earn the pleasure of Allah in paradise. And third, to make Allah love us. And if we're not doing something that fits into one of those categories, we need to shift and change what we're doing. The challenge is that too many times we become distracted very easily. We end up becoming engrossed in life as if the objectives of dunya, of the worldly things, are the end objective. And this is why Allah tells us in this ayah and many other ayahs that indeed this life is but a distraction. The things of this life simply are things that take our focus away from where they should be. And I'm sure this is not a news flash for anybody. That you've heard it before. This is not the first time you're hearing that the things of this world are a distraction. That your focus and goal should be on the hereafter. But the question then comes, why do we continue to become distracted? What is it that needs to happen so that we can refocus? Because you're not hearing this for the first time. I'm sure of it. And yet, despite even hearing it now, we might question whether or not tonight we'll even remember what we just talked about now. Whether the focus of what we're doing and where we're going is truly on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And understand, by the way, when we say that our purpose is the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it doesn't mean that Allah created us in order to stand in prayer 24/7. But rather that everything that we do we do in a way pleasing to Allah and His Messenger. This then becomes an act of worship. And hence, if we eat and you begin by saying Bismillah and you're eating permissible halal food and you don't overstuff yourself and you finish and you thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the food that you ate, your eating was an act of worship. When you go out and work with the intention of providing for your family and the work is a permissible form of work, your working becomes an act of worship. And so, whatever we do, when we're focusing the intention of doing it in a way that is in accordance with Allah and His Messenger, with the intention that it would be pleasing to Allah and His Messenger, then those things become acts of worship. And so, the concept that we must understand is that we should be recategorizing, re-intentionalizing everything that we do so that it fits in line with that intention, so that it becomes things that bring us closer to Allah, that it becomes something that steers us away from the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it becomes something that ultimately engenders our heart more to Allah and makes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also love us. But we have to ask ourselves, what does it take really for us to focus? There was a story of a man who had brought a brand new car. And he's driving through the streets of a relatively poor neighborhood. And as he's speeding along, a brick comes flying out from between the parked cars and hits his windshield, cracking up his windshield. He slams on the brakes, and he gets out of his car and goes running back to see who threw this brick, who just destroyed or messed up the windshield of his brand new car. And he sees this kid crouching down on the ground between two of the parked cars, and he starts yelling at this kid and screaming at this kid, and what do you think you're doing, and why would you do this, and on, just really giving this kid a tongue lashing. And finally, after he's calmed down a little bit, the kid is crying some, and he tells him, look, mister, I'm really sorry, but I'm handicapped, and I fell out of my wheelchair. And sure enough, he looks, and there's a wheelchair on the sidewalk. And he said, I've been here for 2 hours, and I haven't been able to get anybody to stop and help me. And so finally, I did the only thing that I could think of to have somebody notice me and stop to help. And I just need some help getting back into my wheelchair. And the man felt horrible. And it was the man who was telling this story, because what it caused him to reflect on is, why did it take having to get hit with a brick before I could slow down a little bit and start to see what's going on around me? And the question I want us to ask ourselves is that what it takes for us to wake up, to come back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Do we have to get hit with a brick before we pause for a moment and say, wow, let me see where I need to orient myself? How many times do we find somebody in a hospital that had some tragic accident or some serious illness, and they're begging Allah, Ya Allah, just heal me, and now I'm going to start becoming a good person? Because that's the moment they start to realize what's going on in their life. Somebody who's in prison, who was Muslim all their life, but they never thought of it, their deen at all. But now they're in prison, now they're like, Ya Allah, just get me out and I'm going to be such a good Muslim now. Does it take that level of a brick? There was another story, true story also. A brother in Chicago owned a liquor store. And one of the local imams from one of the masjids would take some of the brothers around to go and call the people. So they would stop in the store every week, ask the guy, hey, why don't you come to Jummah? And he was like, well, no, I'm really busy, maybe next week. Anyway, a few weeks go by, the guy's not coming. the imam realized, okay, probably this guy's not going to come, but he has a 15-year-old son. And they talked to the son a little bit there, and the son was interested in coming. So they asked the dad, well, since you can't come, why don't you at least let us, bring your son to Jum'ah, and then after Jum'ah, he comes back to helping you or whatever. Again, same sort of thing. Well, not this week, we're really busy, not this week, we're really busy. Always the excuses, wouldn't let his son go either. Finally, several weeks now, they keep coming back, keep asking. And the shop owner gets really upset with these guys. And he's like, look, my son is really the only one that I can trust with me here in the store. I really don't have anybody else. I'm like, no, but it's just an hour. Just let him come, and it won't be that big of a deal. The guy gets really, really angry. He says, look, I didn't close my store when my father died to attend his funeral. What makes you think I'm going to close my store so that me or my son can go for dinner? The imam said, he told the guys, he got to tell a really bad thing. He said, brothers, we need to go right now. They left. That night, there was a thunderstorm. Lightning struck the guy's store, burned it to the ground. The guy had no insurance, lost everything. On the plus side, the following week, the guy was at Jum'ah. But the question is, do we have to have something that drastic happen to us? And really, by Allah, it was a blessing for him to have that happen. Because how many times is the wake-up call for people? Their death. When the angel is coming to pull their soul, and Allah tells us about those people. Because they're begging the angel of death, please, just give me a little bit more time. I'm going to be so good. I'm going to be so generous. You'll see how much I'm going to do. And it's too late. Because Allah doesn't extend anybody's life. But we don't want to be in a situation where it takes a brick. It takes a bolt of lightning. Or God forbid, it takes our death. Before we wake up to realize the reality. That this life is but an illusion. And that our goal and our focus and our intention should be on pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَأَقُولُ قَوْلَ هَذَا وَأَسْتَغْفِرُ اللَّهَ لَكُمْ. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness, and Allah ghafurun rahim. Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. So why wait to do good? Why wait for somebody else to do it first? Why is it that we tend to too often take a victim mentality? We think it's always somebody else who has the problem. That it's not us. When you've been asked to reach out and do some good. When somebody comes and they say, we need some volunteers. We need some help in this event. We need some donations over here. Whatever the request is, why didn't you do it? For all the times that you were asked and you didn't. How many times were you sitting and thinking, oh, I hope the guy on my left or right is the one who responds and goes ahead and does it? Why do you feel upset when services aren't there? Because everyone else is also just waiting for somebody else. And it's because we get fooled into thinking that this dunya is reality. Because the reality is that the dunya is an illusion. And the problem is that illusions aren't just for entertainment. You hear the ads for the different magic shows, right? And they're what? They're illusionists, right? They amuse you because they fool you into thinking that the guy saws a woman in half and then puts her back together. And we all know that he didn't actually saw the woman in half and put her back together, but it was an illusion. He was able to deceive your eyes to make you think that he did it. You don't know how, but maybe it was mirrors, maybe it was tricks, maybe it was something flexible. You don't know exactly how it happens, but you know it's an illusion. But illusions aren't just entertainment. Because illusions can hurt, can kill. And this is why we have to understand that Allah only makes haram those things that are harmful to us. So you may look and see that your peers are saying that, what's the big deal? We're going to a party and there's some alcohol. That people are just out and they're mingling freely. It's no big deal. Don't worry about it. It's just fun. But Allah doesn't prohibit these things except that they're harmful to us. So even if it seems to be one way, we know the reality is based on what Allah and His Messenger have said. And that's the case so often with dunya. And the nature of shaitan is to always want to deceive us. How many times have marriages fallen apart because of illusion? Making you think that you see something that you don't. False accusations. Sometimes it's the reverse, covering up things that are there and you don't see them. And hence you see that the cause of people entering the hellfire is what? Somebody who is ungrateful. Somebody who says to their spouse, by Allah, I have never seen anything good from you. Because they make a mistake. And then shaitan blinds them to all of the good that their spouse has done. And so they end up reviling them. And it's men and women that it happens to. You get angry and you start yelling and shouting. Why? Because you're now blind to all of the good and you're focusing on some small harm. Or perhaps what you're focusing on is some perceived harm. It's not actually there, but you've already convinced yourself of it. And so we need to ask ourselves what illusions we might be creating for other people that we need to get rid of. Maybe you've created an illusion that your work is the most important thing in your life. That you're uncaring, that you don't have feelings. That you're a real tough guy. That the world revolves around you. And how many people we have that are so self-centered that they don't pause for a moment to consider those around them? What illusions have you believed about others that you may need to get rid of? How much of prejudice comes because people think, oh, those people are lazy? How often do we have trouble fitting in because we're like, oh, none of the people there like me? Or feel that the world is against them. Or that nobody cares about me. How many people carry these false illusions? Oh, I'm too heavy. Oh, I'm too stupid. And they insult themselves all the time. Creating false illusions. My brothers and sisters, we have to wake up and stop believing illusions. We have to recognize that, as Allah has told us over and over in the Quran, that this life is deception. This life is illusion. And we have to see through it in a practical way. We have to see through it in a way that impacts and changes our life and how we live it. Stop waiting for someone else to come out and make the change. Stop waiting for the mythical unity of all the Muslims to come together, then I'm going to jump in and do my part. Because that's never going to happen. Understand that we'll never have a completely solidified, unified Muslim Ummah until we're in Jannah. May Allah grant us all and our families Jannah, but we're not going to see that complete unity of Muslims until we're in Jannah. Between now and then, started the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and it's not going to end until the Day of Judgment. We're going to have differences amongst the believers. So we can't wait around for some magical unity before we start to participate, before we do our part. We have to look and say, you know what? If there's only one Muslim in the whole world who's doing something good, it better be me. Even if nobody else is doing their part, nobody else is doing their share of the load, I'm going to do my share. Because I know I'm accountable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that comes not only in terms of doing the good works. It comes in terms of stopping the bad. It comes in terms of dispelling the illusions, of seeing the good in others, of forgiving the mistakes, of recognizing that shaitan is always actively trying to fool us or to trick us. And so when I see something that's not good, that's not positive, pause for a moment and consider that, you know what, this may be another trick of shaitan. Because we need to correct our perspective so that our goals are focused on Allah. That we can ask ourselves about each thing, am I doing this for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Am I doing this so that Allah will be pleased with me? Am I doing this so I can avoid the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Whatever it is that's going to motivate me of those things, but regardless, is it in line with doing something to increase my state with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So that we don't have to wait for a brick to hit us, or a bolt of lightning, or God forbid our death to come before we wake up and realize that we need to change, that we need to reorient ourselves back to be in line with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so I want us today, before we leave, or as we're driving back home or back to work, to just really pause for some self-reflection and ask, what illusions have we bought into that are from shaitan? And to repurpose and to re-intention our lives, our work, our relation with our spouses, our relation with our children, our relationship with our parents, our relationship with our brothers and sisters, the things that we go and do for fun, the things that we intend as good deeds and worship, all of those things, that we repurpose them and re-intention them for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That we forgive and let go of mistakes and harms that may have been done to us, and we renew our intention to have the best of relationships with all of those around us.